Hi everyone, my name is Starra, and this is Nigel Hendroff.
Hello.
Which many of you know and love. And in today's Masterclass, we're going to be talking about the basics of music directing.
It's going to be fun.
Which is one of our favorite things to talk about. So first off, Nige, like we're having fun. We love chatting about music directing. First off, why don't we tell everyone what the role of the music director is at our church? Because I think in many churches, they call them band leaders. There's different rules and different ways of approaching this. Why don't you explain to everyone what the role of the music director is in our church, how it came about, and yeah.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So the music director role is basically someone who directs the music, as it says. But I guess how it came about is really needing a point person on stage to make the calls, to actually help with communication. You know, with so many people on stage on a platform, it's easy to have maybe half a dozen different interpretations of a moment. So if we have a music director or a band leader or a point person, that person, you know, will default to making the call. So it's clear for everyone. I guess how it came about was the need for better communication on stage. As our platforms got bigger, the need for, you know, we tried to do more stuff on stage.
Yeah.
More technical things musically, or more communication on and off stage, or, you know, working with video and all those sort of things. We just needed a way to communicate better and more effectively. Back in the day, we were, you know, in our hub auditorium where there was no microphones. You know, you may have seen we use microphones to communicate to people's ears. We didn't have anything like that. It was yelling across the stage. You know, it was like, count it in now, you know, and I'm like, what? You know, just, you know, go to the chorus. And we just literally had to yell on stage, you know, and through the betterment of technology and all that sort of stuff, and we've been able to use like microphones and in-ears to be able to communicate to each other more effectively. And really, it's helped us avoid what we call train wrecks and carnage, you know. So that's really like the role of the music director in basic is to direct the music, is to make the calls, just so we're not having different people making calls or interpreting things differently.
And in our context as well, say your voice, Nigel, would also go to front of house, to lighting, to all of our TV control rooms out the back. So that's kind of been something that's been developed over time.
Yep.
But if you find yourself in a small church and maybe you don't have a microphone and there's just 3 or 4 of you on stage, this masterclass still applies to you, because the principles and the basics of it kind of apply, whether it's a very broad role where you're speaking to many teams, or whether you're actually just helping direct the music in your setting.
I think when it's 100%. When we first started, even before all the in-ears and everything like that, the microphone. When we first started using a microphone, I think it only went to the drummer.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I think I remember those days.
It only went to the drummer to be able to tell him to, okay, count it in now. You know, it's pretty much as basic as that. You know, and before we had that, we would just be like, okay. We'd have to establish our methods of communication, because we couldn't talk about it on the fly. Once the music started, it started. We'd have to either walk over to someone or just look at them and eyeball them. So we would be like, okay, drummer, you're counting it in at the, you know, this song, that song. This song, I'm going to start it on the acoustic, and we'd have to establish our communication like that, you know, because we weren't able to just talk about stuff on the fly. So, like you said, it doesn't matter where you're at in terms of technology or your ability. I think it's important to assign a point person on stage, and usually it's someone who may be either more senior or understands music, or knowing how to communicate that music. And we can talk about that more.
It's kind of music and leadership, really.
Yes.
Together. And we often think about it as just being a wingman. So it's kind of your role as a music director is to be the wingman, kind of supporting the worship leader in every aspect regarding the service. So that's kind of the parameters for how we're going to approach today. And we're going to talk about 3 different things. We're going to talk firstly about preparation of how you actually prepare to be a music director in a service. The second thing we're going to talk about is the execution of actually how we do this, what's going on. When you see Nigel talking into a little mic, what on earth is he saying? Is he telling jokes? Yes, sometimes. And then the third thing we're going to talk about is follow-up and kind of what happens afterwards. Do we talk at all? Do we race off the stage? What actually should we do in the follow-up? So hopefully with those 3 things, we're going to have a lot of fun because we love talking about this together. But why don't we get into the topic of preparation, what we actually do before the service. So if we see that we're rostered on, what actually happens? So first of all, Nige, why don't we talk about craft and actually knowing what we're doing before we get there, right?
Knowing what we're doing. I guess, look, the first thing is important to, for myself, and please obviously speak into this, but I mean, I'd like to connect with the worship leader. So if it's Jad or whoever that's leading, I'll send him a message and say, hey, what are your thoughts for the weekend? Do you have any ideas of the song list? And Jad's a very capable musician as well. And so he'll be thinking about the keys of songs. He'll be thinking about how to make all the songs flow into each other. But you may be working with a worship leader who not necessarily plays an instrument, you know. So I think the first point of contact is important, is connecting with your worship leader, getting the song list, and helping shape that journey. You know, in our context, it's usually a 20-minute set.
Yeah.
You know, and we'll help craft that 20-minute set. So I think it starts with the song list. Please.
Yeah, and I think for me personally, if I were to break it down into kind of 3 steps, I need to know my craft. So if we're playing a set list, I need to know my part of the set list. So I need to know what I'm playing first, because I can't be worried about what the guitarist is doing if I don't actually know what I'm doing. So I think for me personally, the first thing would be to know my craft, to know what I'm bringing once I've actually found out what the set list is. What am I bringing? And then the second thing would be to kind of know the basics of each instrument. I think you are great at speaking into that. I'm a keyboard player. I'm not a drummer, but as a music director, I need to speak to the drummer. I need to speak to the guitarist. Do you want to speak into that?
Well, I think it's really important to know how to communicate effectively to each instrumentalist on platform, and also your vocalists and everyone who's involved. I think it's important to understand what they need and how to effectively communicate that to them. So I think it's not very intuitive, if you like, to go to a drummer and say, can you play louder in this section? You know, isn't that most churches' nightmare? You know, a loud drummer playing even louder. But instead of saying, in this section, I want it to be louder, that can be interpreted a myriad of ways. But if you go to the drummer and say, I actually want you to craft a build over these, say, 4 bars, can you hit your snare and your cymbal on the 1 and then go to your toms build, bring your kick in on the 2 and the 4, and then, that sort of language is a lot more intuitive. They can understand that. Yep. They'll be like, oh, okay, so they actually want something really specific. And then when you practice that and when you hear it, you think, oh, okay, that's how to build through a section, as opposed to just playing louder. You know, if you go to a drummer and say, play louder, they could do like this crazy 30-second field and go all, go nuts. And it doesn't really help anyone. So, I mean, that's one example of many things, I think you're really great at that as well. You know, you'll be like, to a guitarist, you bring in the ambient sound that you have, as opposed to just
play.
Do you know what I mean? It's just knowing how to communicate effectively.
Yeah, and I think if you're a music director, one thing that's also important in this is know your team. So I think we'll often look at who's rostered on. And then in our team, I know the guitarists that have really great ambient sounds and pedals. And so I will go, oh, I could capitalize on that. We have a guy on our team, and his name is Nick Mueller, and his nickname is Chippo. And he has this really beautiful ambient sound that he's programmed into his guitar. And so I know if I'm on with him, I know it's beautiful. So I will often find ways that I can showcase that. And so I think knowing who you're on with, and sometimes even that works in a way that you can safeguard your team. So
Totally.
for instance, if I look at my rostered position and I see that there's a brand new drummer, I would have a bit of a flag and go, okay, all right, if this is this guy's first time, how can we set him up to win? How can we put him at ease? How can we make sure that there's not too many curveballs? I'd probably tell the worship leader that there's a brand new drummer on and let's work to safeguard him. But actually knowing who you're on with is actually really important. Do you want to speak any further into that?
No, I think you've really covered it well. It's obviously knowing our players, their capabilities and their limitations. We want to protect them. We don't want to leave them, hang them out to dry, so to speak, you know. Like you said, if there's a new drummer, we would roster our team around them accordingly, you know, so they're not having to carry everything themselves.
Yeah.
It's the same with any instrumentalist. You know, if you have a new keys player, you talked about ambience, you know, using the guitar's ambience. Like a guitarist is also a melodic instrument as well as a piano player.
Yeah.
We look at a second keys player to often cover the pad sounds and do all that. But if that person is new and they're not confident with the sounds, you can also rely on a guitarist, like you mentioned Chippo. Yeah. He's got a great ambient sound, and that position can cover the keys player. You know, and it's just safeguarding. Yeah. You don't want to go to the new place and play this moment here in this transition, and it's going to be your solo by yourself, and then. You know, that's not. They're going to freak out, and there's a high percentage of perhaps something going wrong, and that's just not a win for everyone. So,
yeah, totally. Yeah. We kind of we're meant to be leaders as well, right? So we never want to expose someone, and if someone comes and maybe isn't at the competency that we thought they were at, I think pastorally, it's actually our job to help cover some of that and make sure. Sometimes I've asked a guitarist to play something, and 2 seconds in, I realized that they actually didn't know the part. And there's different ways that you can just cover that. I think the goal would always be to pastor and lead our team appropriately in the moment.
Well, I think everything we do is actually done out of relationship.
Yes.
You know. Do you want to talk about that a little bit more?
I think that's going to kind of come up in many ways, but I feel like everything rises and falls on relationship in that music director role. Your relationship with the other team around you, the other band members, and very importantly, your relationship with the worship leader. Totally. Basically, the more that you have each other's backs, the smoother everything is. And I know that we'll touch on that quite a lot later. The last thing I wanted to just say quickly on the subject of preparation is spiritual preparation. So I feel like, as we've mentioned, we are pastors, and if we get a rostered position to music direct, I think it's really important that we actually prepare our heart for the Sunday and for the worship set. And we don't just turn up going, oh, I've got the capability, I'm awesome, I'm going to do this. I'm sure you are, but how great if we actually spiritually prepare our heart. Spend a little bit of time praying, even if it's, we live busy lives, maybe even if it's just your drive into church on the morning, of just spend some time praying and committing that service to the Lord, seeing if God speaks anything to your heart. I find that my sensitivity is always heightened when I kind of switch on my spiritual eyes for the service and go, okay, God, this isn't just me just playing Cornerstone amazingly. What do you want to do?
Which you do amazingly.
But actually committing that to the Lord. And I think that's really important. Before we even set foot in the church, that we know what we're doing, we know our song list, we know our team, and we've spiritually prepared our heart.